All right, gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to my Ed Puzzle, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So I hope you guys have your notebook out. You're ready to take notes. We're located under Unit 2, Gospel of Mark, all right? And just make sure you guys are taking good notes. So I believe on, let's see, what day was it? Tuesday, I had you guys write down the chronology of Mark 1 through 4, and I want you underneath that same section, or maybe start a new section, whatever, but just write down this chronology as well. If you need to pause the video, that's fine. But just make sure you write down this chronology of the main events of Mark 5 through 12. And the reason I'm having you guys do this is not only because chronology is important, but also because there's going to be a chronology section on the test, right? I know that seems crazy or very difficult, but it's important to realize the order of events because it really gives us insight into kind of how things went down and why people reacted the way they did and why Jesus took the steps he did along the way. So make sure you get this written down. I'm just going to go to the next slide for now, but you guys can pause and then just write it down and then press play and you should be good to go. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about Mark chapter 5. So the last place we left off was Jesus started speaking in parables. Okay, so that was Mark chapter 4, and he's going to continue to preach in parables, but instead of just walking around Jerusalem and his main area, Galilee, Nazareth, those types of places, Jesus in chapter 5, he goes to kind of the slums, the bad part of town. And this is an area called the Gerasenes, Gerasenes. There's a lot of different older interpretations of how it's spelled and stuff like that. But basically, it's kind of the outskirts of the region. And there's a lot of people who are very sinful living out here. And so for Jesus to go out here and start performing miracles and healing people and spend time with these people, it's a big deal. It shows that those types of people are kind of being welcomed back into God's love. So why does Jesus perform so many miracles? I think it's important to realize it's not a random act of mercy. It's not like just, boom, you're healed, boom, you're healed. I know I kind of did that exactly right the other day, but that was kind of to just dramatize events for you. But right, miracles happen at the intersection between faith and mercy. Right? So in order to have a miracle happen, we need to have faith from the person who receives the miracle and mercy from God as well. And it kind of reveals also God's glory. So it's important to realize that people are not saved by random acts of magic. Right? In Mark chapter 6, okay, we have an event that is really cool, okay, a pretty famous event, and it's Jesus walking on water. So this is in the same region. Okay, this is when the disciples and Jesus are coming back from this region where all the sinful people were living. And Jesus is sleeping on shore. The disciples are sleeping out on the boat. And there's a storm happening in the evening. And if you look really closely at the way it's described, you'll notice that the storm looks a lot like the splitting of the Red Sea in Exodus, right, where Moses and the Israelites are running away from the Egyptians, and Moses splits the Red Sea. So the way it's described is very, very similar, and I think it's pretty intentional, right? So what happens with the disciples? Well, they're really scared. The sea is very stormy, and all of a sudden they see something that looks like a ghost, right? When in reality it is Jesus. And when Jesus approaches them, they're terrified. Okay, they think it's a ghost, and he says, "It is I." Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it should be a big deal because the only other person in Scripture who says these lines, "It is I," is God. Okay, so there's two things really to write down here, two important things. One is that this incident, this scene, is meant to remind us of the splitting of the Red Sea, and therefore remind us, okay, that God, this is God essentially, right? And a new Moses kind of leading us into freedom, a new freedom, away from the slavery of the Egyptians. And the second thing, right, is that this is one of the first moments where Christ reveals to the disciples that he's not just a nice guy. He's not just a regular old Messiah, right? This is God. This is not just a nice guy. This is God. Okay, that's kind of what we realize here when he says, "It is I." All right. So in Mark chapter 6, kind of out in the desert area, we have this scene which is told twice. Okay, we have one story told twice. There's the feeding of the 5,000, and there's the feeding of the 4,000. Okay, so why is there a difference? Why do we have a feeding of the 5,000 and a feeding of the 4,000? Well, 5,000 is typically a Jewish number, right? The number 5. Think about how many books in the Torah, right? 5. And 4 is typically a Gentile number. It's associated with the 4 ends of the earth, the 4 directions on a compass, right? So it's kind of a more worldly number, 4, right? So it's told twice because Mark, the gospel writer, okay, wanted to kind of reach both audiences. So that's kind of the background information as to why there's a 5,000 and a 4,000. Let's talk about the actual significance of the story, right? So this is one of the only stories that's told in all 4 Gospels. So you know it's going to be important, okay? And the reason it's important is because it's meant to remind us, right, once again, of something from the Exodus, right? Christ, in many ways, can be seen kind of as a new Moses, right? So this feeding of all these people with bread, right, is meant to remind us of the feeding of the many people in the desert with manna, right? And so this is yet again, right, another instance where Christ is kind of comparing himself to bread, right, and making us think about bread in general. Right, so that's kind of the significance of this story, right? We're trying kind of building up this theme of the Eucharist. And before we talk about Jesus being rejected, actually, I think this is, we'll talk about Jesus getting rejected. So, Jesus does get rejected in his hometown. Why does he get rejected? It's prophesied, right? It foreshadows the rejection of all the Israelite people towards Christ. So that's kind of the key significance of this passage here. So I'm kind of just blazing through this stuff. All right, so I'm not going to talk much about what's on here. I do want to talk about in chapter 7, though. If you guys open your books to chapter 7, verse 15. Okay, there's going to be a quiz question about this. Chapter 7, verse 15. Mark chapter 7, verse 15. Excuse me. What does it say? It says, "Nothing that enters one from outside can defile that person, but the things that come out from within are what defile." So why am I reading that verse? What does that have to do with anything? So the background to this verse, right, is that the Pharisees, a religious group of people during Jesus' time, they are essentially telling Jesus, hey, you're being really ritually impure. Like, you're not washing your hands. Your disciples, they're hanging out with sinners and lepers, and we don't want that kind of stuff coming in to our life. And Jesus says this line: "Nothing that enters one from outside can defile that person, but the things that come out from within are what defile." So what does this mean? Why is this significant? This is a really important line. Jesus is essentially doing exactly what we've talked about, of flipping that understanding upside down, that, just because you are a dirty, good-for-nothing, homeless man living down by the creek, right, doesn't mean you can't worship, have salvation, right, participate in your religion, okay? This has to do with the physical nature of sin that the Israelites believed in. And Jesus is challenging that, and in fact saying, It's not right. Okay? So this is a big deal. This is Jesus really kind of standing up for this new way of thinking, for sure. All right, let's talk about Peter, and then we're actually going to be done because we ended in class, I believe, with Peter. So if you are reading, let's see here, chapter 8, okay? And in my Bible, it has part 3, the mystery begins to be revealed, right? Chapter 8, verse 27 begins with Peter's confession about Jesus. And what does he confess? Jesus, essentially, he's with the disciples, and, people are starting to grumble about Jesus, saying, he's really challenging us on these ways of thinking, and he's got all these miracles going on. He's got big crowds of people hanging out with lepers. And the religious authorities are getting very jealous, remember. And Jesus asks his disciples the question, who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? And it's really the question that he kind of asks all of us. Right? Who do you really believe Christ is? Do you think he's just a nice guy? Do you think he is just a really good leader? Or do you think he's God? It's the defining question of our faith, really. And a couple of the disciples don't get it right? But Peter said to him in reply, "You are the Messiah." And in the other Gospels, right, Peter adds, "You are the Messiah. You are the Son of God." Okay, so Peter gets it right. Peter nails it. He knocks it out of the park. And this is a guy who's gonna mess up several times, as we will see in the Gospels. But this is the reason that Jesus picks him as his successor, as the first pope, because he's the first person to really acknowledge, to take that leap of faith. Right, that this isn't just a normal Messiah. This isn't just another Judas Maccabeus. This is the Son of God. Right, so this is why Peter is picked as the first pope. All right, and make sure you guys answer the questions along the way. Like I said, it is going to be counted for points, 3 points. If you get all 3 questions right, it'll be a 3 out of 3. They should be really easy. All right, we'll see you guys later, and don't forget to do your homework, which is to read chapter 13 through 16, finish the book of Mark, essentially. We'll talk about it on Tuesday, and then we'll take a test on Thursday. So have a good weekend. Go Chiefs! See you later.